Before we jump into the episode today, I want to share something with you from my heart. First of all, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I really can't tell you how much your support means to me. We've been doing the podcast now for almost 4 years. I can't even believe it. And I'm so grateful for each and every single one of you that listens, shares an episode with your friends, sends me a DM or a text message letting me know how an episode resonated with you or any aha moments. Seriously, I couldn't be more grateful to be able to create this podcast. It has been such a blessing in my life, and I love hearing the ways it's been able to provide value in yours as well. One thing you might not know is how much work it takes to be consistent with a podcast. In fact, did you know that the majority of podcasts don't make it past episode number 10? And we are well beyond that. And it's just a lot thinking of the episodes, recording them, editing them, managing the guests, making sure that everything runs smoothly and gets uploaded consistently and regularly. And so that's why I have created an amazing opportunity for you to support the podcast monetarily. And in exchange for that, you will get exclusive premium subscriber content. So for as little as $3 a month, you can become a premium subscriber of the podcast. And every month I will upload new voice-guided workouts and breathwork meditation audio for you. So that way you can work out with me, coaching you in your ears. You can also take a moment to reduce your stress and relax and come down and ground down with one of my breathwork audios. So if that is on your heart to support the podcast for as little as $3 a month to become a premium podcast subscriber, I can't tell you how much that means to me and the growth of this podcast. I appreciate you. If you're interested, click the link in the description, become a premium podcast subscriber, new content every month, and while supplies last, I'll send you an exclusive podcast coffee mug so you can have your self-love and sweat coffee every morning. I appreciate you. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, the place where you'll get inspired to live your life unapologetically, embrace your perfect imperfections, break down barriers, and do what sets your soul on fire. I'm your host, Lunden Souza. Hey friend, it's me, Lunden Souza, online lifestyle transformation coach. I help people all over the world just like you who know they are meant for more, get their mind right and their body tight, and go from crazy busy to crazy happy. And hey, if it's our first time meeting, welcome. So happy to have you. And if you've been with us for a while, it's so great that you're here too. I'm really excited to share this episode of the Self-Love and Sweat podcast with you. Hey, I want to tell you quickly about 2 ways that you can get connected beyond the podcast to up-level your health, your life, your fitness, reach your goals, but also support the podcast as well. So the first option is our Self-Love and Sweat monthly members-only meetup. We meet up on the last Saturday of the month on Zoom for 90 minutes to cover some important topics, to answer your questions, and then to also do a workout together. It's a great way to have that support, have that accountability, get supercharged, and get reminded that there are other people all over the world on this journey of self-love and sweat, and you don't have to do it alone. You can join your first month for only $1 using code SELFLOVE1 at checkout, and then it's $27 a month after that. So you go to lifelikeLondon.com/monthly, use the code SELFLOVE1 at checkout to try us out, test it out for only $1 for your first month, and then you can be on board to listen to the podcast, join up on the meetups, and just really feel like you're connected and thriving on this journey to reach your goals. The second option is our Strong at Home for Women 8-week dumbbell-only workout plan. We have women all over the world getting stronger from the inside out right at home, right? So we're ready to take action to get stronger despite the circumstances of the world. And we know that we're not about to do that alone. So embark on this 8-week journey with us. You can go to lifelikeLondon.com/strong at home. You can pick up your 8-week plan. And the exciting thing is that every 8 weeks, we open it up, myself and my co-coach, for VIP all access coaching with us. So not only do you get the plan, but you get Zoom fireside chats with us. You get an exclusive way to chat with us anytime so you can ask your questions, share your progress. And we're always continuing to stay connected and motivate and inspire each other on our journey to get stronger, no matter what that means for us. So if you know that you're meant for more, you're ready to get stronger from the inside out, and you're just like, yes, I need a plan and some structure, something to tell me what to do. I know I'm ready, but I need that coaching. I can't do it alone. We are here for you. You can go to lifelikeLondon.com/strong at home, pick up the plan, figure out when our next VIP all access registration is opening so you can get that support and guidance. And the third thing, I said there was two, but the third thing is you can do both. You can join us for those monthly meetups. You can be there for the 8-week program. You know, this coaching and this support is here for you. We want to get you real results that last so you never have to start over again. And so you guys are awesome. Enjoy this episode. Get connected. Self-love and sweat, friends. Okay, today's guest on Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast, is Jana Danielson. She's an award-winning wellness entrepreneur who, through her own experience with physical pain, turned her mess into her message. She's an Amazon best-selling author, owner of Lead Pilates and Lead Integrated Health Therapies, her brick and mortar businesses, and the Meta District, her online wellness community. She is the creator of the Cooch Ball, the world's first patented pelvic floor fitness tool for women. Jana has coached and consulted with thousands of women from all over the world to help improve their quality of life, their confidence, and their impact in this world. Welcome to the podcast today, Jana. I am so excited that you're here today.
Thanks, Lunden. I'm excited to be here too.
So let's jump right in because I'm so excited to have you here. I think that this topic on the pelvic floor is just so necessary to talk about. And I honestly feel that more and more as I'm talking to you because you have been such a great resource, so much knowledge in our previous conversations talking about the pelvic floor. And I feel like I'm learning so much from you. And I know that there are a lot of women that listen to the podcast, a lot of men too, because I know that there's kind of a dual use for your product, which we'll talk about too. But yeah, I'm just so excited to have your brain here with us on the podcast to learn more about the pelvic floor. So let's start just really from the basics, because this was like the first question we talked about when you and I talked. What is the pelvic floor and how do we know where that is?
Okay, so let me give you this visualization. If you can think of a cylinder, right? A cylinder has a bottom, a floor, and a roof. And then there's the 360-degree cylindrical walls. Let's call it that. Okay, so, and maybe you have a vase that looks like that, or a pitcher, or something like that. So just think about that, because what a lot of people don't understand is that our core is so much more than our abdominal. So that's kind of the first fitness movement myth that I want to debunk, because there is such a belief that your core is your six pack and your obliques. And maybe you might hear people talk about the transverse abs, maybe. But what I love to educate on is just helping women and men understand that if we shift the paradigm a little bit, and if we truly understand that the core is this cylinder with a roof and a floor, then you have the magic can happen, really. Because here's what's a kind of a bit of a secret. People don't realize that our diaphragm, which is the main muscle of respiration. So your diaphragm is a muscle that sits in the crest of your rib cage. So think about like an open umbrella or a mushroom cap just tucked up into the ribs. That's what the diaphragm looks like. And because it's our main muscle of respiration, just like anything else, if you want to have strong arms, you're going to work your shoulders and your biceps and your triceps, right? This diaphragm as a muscle needs to be worked. Well, guess how you work this muscle? It's through breathing, diaphragmatic breathing. And so many people, we live in such a high anxiety environment. And I feel like when we don't have a toolkit that includes ways to learn how to nurture that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, we really can't get to that muscle. Let's sprinkle a little bit of gravity on the planet we live on. And now all of a sudden we've got this forward rounded posture, this big muscle that is meant to fill our 75 trillion cells with oxygen, can't do its job. And here's why that's important, is because the diaphragm as the roof of our core has a direct relationship with the pelvic floor, which is the floor of our core. So simply put, if you are not breathing properly, it's not if you will have pelvic floor dysfunction, it's when will that pelvic floor dysfunction show up, because those two groups of muscles speak like the same language. Think about when you're in the gym, right? Like you have your agonist and your antagonist, right? You've got your bicep and then your tricep. So when your bicep is shortening, your tricep is lengthening, right? Like the body is a brilliant, simple machine. Well, the pelvic floor and the diaphragm are exactly like that. So when one is not optimized, the other also is not going to be optimized. So that's what I love to start just with the visualization of what is it, how does it is part of the core and it holds our organs up. It's a very sensual muscle. So it's got function, it's got sensuality, and a lot of our confidence is directly related to that group of muscles. Because when they work, it is awesome. When they don't, it can be very, it really can take the confidence level of a woman and a man away. Because in a man's body, the pelvic floor is directly related to erectile dysfunction. In a female body, it's so much more than just, oh, I've had a baby, I should do some kegels so I can run without wearing a pad. And so that's how I like to just frame this initial part of the pelvic floor to help people understand that it is pretty simple. It's part of a more complex structure, but breath is the first thing we do when we're born, right? Mm-hmm. So if you understand that, then strengthening your pelvic floor or making it more functional is truly a fitness issue versus a medical issue.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love everything you said. Thanks so much. And that visualization is amazing. Something that you said, how do we know if it's working or not working, our pelvic floor?
Okay. So let me help you understand the pelvic floor can be hypertonic, which means like tight like a rock wall. Okay. If you're someone that has a hypertonic pelvic floor, and again, that would be, men with erectile dysfunction, blood flow cannot make it through to the penis. In a woman's body, that's going to be, you cough or you sneeze and you pee a little bit, right? That's what's going to happen when the muscles are too tight. On the other end of the spectrum, there's hypotonic, HYPO. So it's too loose. We can't find that kegel, or we can't, you put your hand on your doorknob when you just came back from getting groceries and you didn't have to go to the bathroom a nanosecond ago. And all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, you drop the groceries and you run. That's hypotonic. Also constipation is one of the symptoms of hypertonic when it's too tight. So understanding when there are these seemingly basic symptoms, they can, they very easily plug back to the pelvic floor. So we can gauge function based on those life experiences. You can also base function on sex, because when the pelvic floor is healthy and working really good, sex is very pleasurable. Orgasms are very pleasurable. So there's some really easy ways. I want to just quickly touch though on the idea that, and Lunden, you talk a lot about functional training, right? Like, it's like, what are you teaching your body during that workout that's going to serve you while you're living your life? It's the same, I parallel that mindset is that if I can't confidently draw a line from what I'm doing to how it's going to impact my life, why am I doing it? Right. And so when you're functionally working your pelvic floor, when you are, picking up your toddler, or in our case here, shoveling snow, we want those functional movements to be available to us when we need them. A lot of hip pain and low back pain can also become a part of a dysfunctional pelvic floor.
Got it. Got it. Yes. No. And I love the idea of functionally training the pelvic floor, which we've talked about before on our previous conversation, because I just love talking with you and learning more about this. But one of the things, you mentioned, and probably a lot of us know, are kegels.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably, up until I started learning more about this through you, I don't know, I probably would have to Google if, maybe kegels, also some Pilates exercises that activate the pelvic floor. But I think when we think of, non-functioning pelvic floor, or we've had a baby or something like that, kegels are the thing. And I think what I've learned from you, and you can talk more about it too, is that the most functional thing to do for our pelvic floor?
So I love this question because, the Kegel was created by a male physician as a way to help women contract their pelvic floor, right? So I've had 3 babies, they're 16, 18, and 21 now. But I can remember after having them, just doing a Kegel and just being like, oh yeah, okay, my body is intact. I can still feel that. But from a functional perspective, I believe that a Kegel falls short. And here's why. So many of us have been taught that a Kegel is, the sensation of stopping the flow of urine and then starting it, stopping the flow of urine and starting it. All right. So let's apply that concept to weightlifting or working, or weight training. Okay. So if I took that concept of stop the flow of urine, start the flow of urine, stop, start. If I took that to a bicep, okay, let's just use the exact same thought process. So if someone came to you and they were like, Lunden, I've got this wedding coming up and I've got this really cute little black dress and it's strapless and I want to have great arms. Can you help me? Right? I know you wouldn't say to them, I want you to make a bicep and I want you to squeeze and release and squeeze and release and squeeze and release and squeeze and release all day long, or 10 or 12 times, or for 4 minutes. You would never train them that way, right? Because we're going to be training a muscle that just gets short. And then what happens when we have to go to hug somebody or drive our car, right? That muscle is not going to be functional. It's the exact same thing with the pelvic floor. If we're teaching on, off, what happens in the middle? Like what happens in between? Because muscles don't just work and not work. They work their way up to a load, and then they work their way down at the end of a load or at the end of a rep, right? So what I like to explain is almost like the next level of the Kegel. So if you're visualizing, or if you feel right now as you're listening to us, like stop the flow of urine, what does that feel like? Okay.
I think everybody's doing that right now. I think everybody listening, including myself, is doing this right now. We're like, okay, where is it? Did I find it? Is it there? Yes.
Perfect. And guys, those of you that are in the audience today, and again, I've got no personal experience with this, but from my training, what I understand it is a pelvic floor contraction for you is like lifting the boys. If you were walking into a lake or the ocean and the water was cool and it got like mid-thigh, it's apparently it's lifting of the scrotum. That's the pelvic floor. Okay. So as you're squeezing and as you're releasing, so establish that baseline of the Kegel. Now let's change what we're thinking in our mind more to, if you were like going to wash your hands, right? You would turn the faucet on and the water would slowly start, and then there would be more flow of water, and then you would turn the tap and it would go to nothing, right? So think of it more like that. So when you inhale through your nose, that really is when the pelvic floor is at its relaxed state. The lungs are filling with air. The diaphragm's got to get out of the way. So the inhale phase is just kind of the preparation phase of working the pelvic floor. But when we exhale, if you think about like an elevator and you're drawing that pelvic floor up from the ground floor to like floor 3 or 4 or 5, and then instead of just cutting the elevators and plummeting to the earth like the drop of doom at Disney World, you want to slowly bring that elevator back down to the ground floor. So that's the inhale. Okay. So as you're preparing again, it's the exhale that creates the lift, and it's the inhale that creates the lower of the pelvic floor, which for a lot of people, you guys, is counterintuitive. Mm-hmm. And I want to just touch on, I've worked with a lot of athletes, CrossFit athletes, and they tend to deal with a lot of incontinence. And I had one master's athlete that went to the CrossFit Games, and she was very successful. But she said to me, like, when I'm doing my double unders, there's like a puddle on the floor and it's not sweat, but I don't know what else to do. And so when you are, and I know you and I we're going to touch on this. So I think let's meander into this.
Absolutely. Yes. This is such a great topic when it comes to strength training and the power of the pelvic floor and movements that I know a lot of people that are listening do. And this will really, really, help us improve our strength training, especially when it comes to longevity and wanting to show up for that.
Absolutely. All right. So let's think about this. Can you put yourself in your workout, whether you're at your home gym or doing a boot camp outside or at the gym, and maybe you're upping your weights? Have you had moments where you brace to prepare to lift the load and then you lift and then you lower? My question to you is, do you ever breathe through that? Or are you lifting while you hold? Are you holding your breath to brace, to lift, and then put the weight down? I would argue that many of us, I ask that question a lot to my athletes, and they're like, I don't know. I don't know if I breathe, and so then we'll go through it, and it's evident that they'll like take a big breath in before they lift, like let's say even any kind of Olympic weightlifting or even just your basic deadlift, right? If you are on the lifting, the stand, going from the 90-degree phase up to standing tall, if you're holding your breath, that action of just holding your breath through that range of motion is creating what we call interabdominal pressure. And so what's actually happening without you even realizing it is there are these pressure cavities within our abdomen. And it's like someone taking if they were going to punch you, it's like someone's arm inside your body punching down into your pelvic floor and putting all of this unnecessary stress and tension into this strong yet potentially fragile group of muscles. And now you repeat that and you repeat that and you repeat that. And all of a sudden, 2 months in, you're thinking, wait, what's going on? Like, I'm feeling stronger, but what's this like? Why am I, dribbling a little bit when I do this? And you don't want to undo all the great things you're doing with your weight training. So when you are in that, we'll just use the deadlift as an example because we've mentioned it. When you're going from, if you have the weight on the ground and you're going to your upright position, really engaging your glutes, right? Getting those hamstrings into the action. That really should be an exhale as you go from the 90-degree, kind of row position, I guess, up to standing. Because in that range of motion now, you are taking the intra-abdominal pressure and you're exhaling and lifting your pelvic floor as you're standing tall. Now, here's the beauty. You're protecting your low back from any kind of like herniation of your disc or rupture of your disc, any low back strain, like any of those things that, those magical tweaks that we hear. I just lifted and I tweaked. I don't know what I did, but it tweaked, right? When the pelvic floor, because it's like a bridge between the right and left side of our body and between our pubic bone and our anus, it's like this bowl, right? And when the bowl is just like, not doing anything, it really compromises the musculature around it. And you will not optimize the results of your weight training if you don't start to just become mindful and get that pelvic floor on your radar.
Yes. So I guess what you're saying, and I love listening to you, and you do such a great job of creating these like pictures in our minds, but instead of having that braced core and almost that downward pushing feeling, I was doing it as you were saying it. And it's not the same pushing down feeling as you would like to go poop. Like it's not that. It's more in front. Like I can feel it as I do it. So I hope you guys listening are like doing the cues that Jana is saying, because it's so helpful to be able to kind of understand that area of your body. Like you said, a lot of athletes, I don't know, what am I doing? So I love that. So instead of pushing down, we should be lifting up as we're doing, for example, we use the deadlift, but would that be the same for like a squat or like any exercise, or is it just when we're bringing it from the ground back up?
No, it really is any exercise. And here's how you gauge, like, when do you inhale and when do you exhale? Okay. So if you match your exhale to your pelvic floor contraction, the work phase of the pelvic floor. That's all you need to know. So think about it. I mean, yes, you could argue that there's work on both phases, 100%, but let's even say like just a basic bicep curl. If you had a bar in front of you, I would, inhale to prepare my movement. I would exhale to lift. I could take a sip of air at the top and then exhale to lower, just make sure on the descent I was, holding, or I could exhale up and inhale down. Okay. So for me, because lifting the weight against gravity is going to be the phase that is going to require the most strength, I would argue. So that's where I would match. That's where I would match my exhale. Okay. On a squat, I would, inhale to squat and then exhale as I was standing back up, drawing that pelvic floor up as I came back to standing. So there's not like a one size fits all, because for a lot of people, they'll take that prep inhale breath on both ends of the range and then exhale through the lift and the lower. But it's really important that, and what you had said to clarify that intra-abdominal pressure, it is kind of more at the front than that kind of pooping sensation. But here's the thing, everyone, our pelvic organs, like our bladder, is located, think of it at the front. And so over time, we can actually be encouraging that prolapse of that bladder. So a prolapse of the pelvic floor organs are a descent or a dropping of the uterus, the bladder, right, into that pelvic like sling. It's like a sling, right? Or a hammock. And so prolapses are graded from a grade 1 through to a grade 4. Okay. So grade 1 and 2 in most bodies, through some pelvic floor physiotherapy and through some work like with your Cooch Ball, you can correct. All right. Level 3 prolapse or grade 3 prolapse, if you feel like pressure kind of low in your abdomen, that could be a really good indicator that those organs are dropping. And the prolapse isn't like a level 4 or a grade 4, you guys. Like the organ has actually come through, it's not up in your body anymore. Like it is out of your body. And so at that point, probably some pelvic floor surgery, they use like a piece of mesh, they pin it up, right? And then send you on your way. But here's the important thing to understand is that these are muscles, whether you have surgery or not. And just like the other muscles in our body, if we don't acknowledge and spend a little bit of time working with them, then that becomes, they become compromised. And so we want to catch things at that level 1 or grade 1 or grade 2, so we can create the strength to draw those organs back up. Because usually grade 3 and grade 4 do require some medical intervention.
Yes. And so it's just, it makes me think of that because my grandma, my dad's mom, she had prolapse, definitely phase 4. 8 kids though. So, I mean, I know that all of it plays a role, but I think about that because that's like close to home. That's my grandma. And I know, and she's very open and vocal about it. So she'll tell me all about it. Right. So I know. And I just feel like, it's like not prevention, but like you said, just training it and bringing awareness and making it, just as important as your other workout routine or other healthy routines, because it's like down the road. That's when we get to see. It's like, it might be fine and you feel fine, in your 20s, whatever. But it's like, as you go on and you keep working out and keep training and have children and then ignore the pelvic floor and not training it and not working it. I at least have that visual in my brain from her description and her just being my grandma, that I really, I think about that. And that's, it's so important. Just like with, anything when it comes to exercise, it's like we might not see the results of not doing that right in this moment, but later on, it can really be an issue. So how do we train our pelvic floor and how often should we be doing it? And
Okay. So, I like to, the Cooch Ball regime or regimen is 3 minutes. Okay. Because I think it's hard to argue that you don't have 3 minutes in the day to, spend on your pelvic floor health. So really, you guys, the easiest way to work your pelvic floor, no one even has to know you're doing it. You can be at a red light in your vehicle, you can be in line at the grocery store. And really what you're doing, and I explained how critical diaphragmatic breathing is to that part of the body. So when I do mine, and I do like 10 to 12 reps of breath, once a day, and then I'll get on my Cooch Ball later on in the evening and do my 3-minute routine. But really, the simplest way to work your pelvic floor is to find your diaphragmatic breathing strategy, really. So again, it's inhale through your nose. And if you're driving, don't do this. But if you're just listening, if you put one hand on the flat bone just above your chest called the sternum, and one hand on your belly button, here's how you know that you're actually using your diaphragm muscle. So can you just give me like 3 big breath cycles? So I want you to inhale through your nose. And then I want you to exhale out of your mouth like you are a friendly dragon, or, fogging up the mirror in your bathroom. It has like an HA sound. Do that again. Inhale through your nose. And then exhale. Now on this last one, pay attention to which hand moves more. Inhale. And exhale. Okay, so here's what I can tell you. If your top hand moved more, you're what I call one of my little fishy breathers, because you're breathing with your gills, okay? And we don't really have gills. Well, we did when we were embryos, but the neck muscles, the sternocleidomastoids and the scalenes, they're actually secondary breathing muscles, you guys. But because we don't use our diaphragm, our body is so smart that it's like, oh, the primary muscle for breathing is unavailable today. Let's put the breathing into the secondary muscles. But guess what? These secondary muscles already have a job. Their job is to hold our beautiful head on our body. So now we're saying, all right, little muscles that look like little pieces of beef jerky. They're not big, right? You need to hold this bowling ball on the end of this wire, and you need to work every single time someone breathes, which I believe is about 86,000 times a day. Okay. So if you have chronic neck tension, chronic headaches, brain fog, TMJ, like jaw things, you go to your chiro, acupuncturist, massage therapist, and you're good for like 3 days. And you're like, oh, my tension is back in my neck. Here's what I can tell you is that you are creating that tension because you are making the muscles in those areas do work. They're not really built to do. So if you can get that bottom hand moving more, that's how you can be 100% confident that you're using your diaphragm in an impactful way. It's activating the deepest level of abdominals called your transverse abdominis, and you're going to get that sensation of the pelvic floor drawing up every time you exhale. So it literally is as simple as that. 10 to 12 breaths, maybe first thing in the morning so you can check it off your list and go on with your day. On the other side of things, you guys, there's the release part. Okay. So think of when you're using like a foam roller or maybe like a lacrosse ball to get rid of some of those knots in your back. The pelvic floor also needs to be released. And that's exactly why I created the Cooch Ball.
Yes. And let's talk about the Cooch Ball, because I love that you said 10 to 12 reps, do it first thing in the morning, get it done. I think that everyone listening, we'll challenge them to do that. It's like 12 repetitions of exercising the pelvic floor. Feel free to, and we'll put all of our social media links and stuff in the show notes, but hit us up and tell us how it goes, because if we can find, a lot of us that are listening are finding, way more than 3 minutes to work out per day. So it's like that extra 3 minutes is totally doable. But let's talk about the Cooch Ball. And for those of you watching this video on YouTube, you can see the Cooch Ball. For those of you listening on the podcast, you can't, but it is a ball the size of I'm going to say full juicy grapefruit. So it's not giant. And it reminds me of a dodgeball. It reminds me of being in school and playing, kickball, basketball, or dodgeball or whatever. And it has this kind of traction on the outside that looks kind of like checkered boardish. And it's definitely, it's thicker. It's not like one of those blue balls that maybe you've seen at a Pilates class. It's really the skin of it is very thin, let's say. This one has definitely, some strength to it. So tell us about the Cooch Ball. And I've been using mine, which I love. And all your helpful videos that come with this are just, awesome. I had no questions about if I was doing it right or what I should be doing, how full the ball should be and stuff like that. So I've been using mine for almost a week now. And it's been awesome and interesting to explore kind of this space there. So tell us more about it and why it's so helpful.
Okay. So I realized that there was a problem that needed to be solved when I would teach my Pilates classes or do some movement education, and I would train about the pelvic floor, and they would be radio silence in my classes. No one would ask any questions. And then my inbox would be full of emails, that night. And I'm like, okay, why, as women, why aren't we talking about this? Right? We talk about, getting a good butt or, all these other muscles, but yet these are muscles. And so, again, why weren't we talking about it? So I did some work with a urogynecologist from Reno, Nevada. His name is Dr. Bruce Crawford. And he did some flagship research, which was very intriguing to me. He found that the pelvic floor doesn't work on its own. There are 3 other muscle groups that work as co-recruiters, he called them, or teammates. So those 3 muscles were the transverse abs, and those abdominals start in our low back. They wrap around our body. They come up toward our sternum, it's like they line the rib cage, and then they come down toward the pubic bone. So the transverse abs are like a big weight training belt that hold us in. So when the pelvic floor is functional, the transverse abs work, our adductors or our inner thighs, and then the glute med. So the medius part of the glute that kind of wraps around from the tailbone to the side of the hip. All right. And so as I started learning about all of this, and the other thing that he said was in his research, he wanted to find out what exercises were the best at working the pelvic floor and its co-recruiters. The squat and the lunge were number 1 and 2. And then the top 10 were rounded out with 8 Pilates mat exercises. So as a Pilates instructor right now, he's got even more of my attention. Then he goes on to say in his research study of over, 2,000 women and looking at 200 exercises from yoga, Pilates, and personal training, he realized that about 90% of the women that were in his study, their pelvic floor issues were actually movement issues, not medical issues. So what if we could take a lineup of 10 women waiting for a surgery, and we could tap 9 of them on the shoulder and say, hey, if you just learned about this part of your body, and if you were consistent with 3 minutes a day, would that be enough for you to get out of this line, to get surgery and deal with this on your own? And so I started straddling foam rollers and using those little Pilates balls, sitting on them, because that muscles to be functional need blood flow. Without blood flow, a muscle is going to, like a plant without water, it's going to die. And that's what happens in a lot of our pelvic floor situations is we are not getting the proper oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich blood to that area. We kegel sometimes, but we don't ever think about the optimization of the wellness of that area of our body. So a roller didn't quite work. My Pilates balls weren't quite working. And so I just went out and started trying to find somebody that would help me to create this ball. And that's what I did. So it's a 5-inch diameter, which works beautifully for both a male and a female pelvis. It's got, the patent is really cool because it's this special nylon thread that we have around the bladder of the ball, which, as you said, Lunden, kind of gives it some structure, right? So when you sit on the ball, what's happening is kind of like the perfect storm. I teach the diaphragmatic breathing while you're sitting on the ball, and you can sit on, your couch, you can sit on the floor, you can sit on your bed, you can sit on your kitchen chair. It doesn't matter where you sit. But when you put the ball between those bony butt bones and kind of behind your pubic bone and in front of your anus, it kind of sits in there like a mother hen on her nest of eggs, right? And then when you start doing your diaphragmatic breathing, the perfect storm analogy is that the weight of your body on the ball is creating the release of those muscular tissues, the fascial tissues, the nerves get this yummy blood flow supply as if you were doing your IT bands on a roller. Then layer on the diaphragmatic breathing and you're getting the strength and the release in 180 beautifully wrapped up seconds. And that's really what it is, why it is, and how it came to be.
Right. All amazing things start that way. It's like, oh, I was looking for something and I couldn't find it, so I made it. And I just think you're an absolute brilliant genius, Jana. And I love that story. That's really how it is. And most of the time, what do people do when they can't find something that helps them? They complain and they blame. And so instead, you just kind of went out and created that. And so I love that you said adding on or stacking on the diaphragmatic breathing on top of sitting on it, because I have not been doing that. I've just been sitting on it. So the ball is super cool. It literally has the instructions written on the outside. It says, place ball between pubic bone and anus, sit on the ball for 2 to 3 minutes a day. So like I was just following kind of the recipe or prescription here, but I also want to make to talk about the 2 to 3 minutes. Because one of the things that I noticed in the beginning when using it is like, oh, this is like new. This is different. And like, this kind of feels like it's intense. It kind of hurts a little bit. I think anyone who's ever foam rolled, which I think is a great example, and also a funny visual of you just like trying to find different things that like work for this. I just love that. I love that. I love when people kind of, just really go for it and lean in there. But when you're foam rolling, I think a lot of us who have foam rolled, it's kind of like you have this like love-hate relationship with it. You know, it's doing your body really well, but like sometimes it hurts and you're foam rolling down certain muscles and it gets sensitive. And so for a lot of us, like we've never, done exercises where we're, placing things in that spot perhaps and working those muscles in that area. So it can be a little, it's like a workout. It's like a little bit uncomfortable until you get good at it. And so can you talk a little bit about that and just kind of what to expect when using it at first?
For sure. So thanks for mentioning that. So there is a direct relationship between the health of those tissues of the pelvic floor and what I call the ouch factor. Okay. So if those tissues are very unhealthy and you get on your Cooch Ball, it's going to be like, what in the H is going on here? Like it's going to hurt. And you're going to be like, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. It's just the biofeedback, right? When the tissues are, again, like beef jerky and not like a T-bone steak, you're going to feel a bit of uncomfortableness. As you start to bring health and wellness via blood flow to that area, the ouch factor is going to start to decrease. So, gang, I've had women, like sometimes they start with like 15 seconds and that's it. And they're like, I'm out, right? And then they slowly increase their time. So for some women, it takes like a month to work up to 3 minutes. And that's why I love using the diaphragmatic breathing as your guide. Because if you are holding your breath or guarding or clenching while you're on the ball, you're actually undoing all the goodness that you're trying to bring into your body. So what I say is if you can do your diaphragmatic breathing on the ball in a very calm, relaxed way, the other thing your breathing is doing is it's sending a message to your brain that despite the pain, because I use ouch factor as a fun little term, but it can be painful. And we are adverse to pain, right? Like we're meant to we put our hand by a hot stove and our nervous system is like, oh, get away from that. We don't want you to be in pain. So when you're breathing diaphragmatically, when there's some discomfort, it's reminding your brain like, no, I am choosing this. And there is a purpose for what we're doing. I'm okay. You don't have to send in the troops to save me, right? Like we don't have to be guarded. But if that is the case for you, what I always say is try it on your bed. Okay. The mattress will take a bit of the brunt of the ball and then you'll be able to stay for longer, or get on your couch and then work your way down to your mat or, like I said, a chair. So that's important to understand. And thanks, Lunden, for mentioning that, because it is a new sensation for many, many women. And they think that they're doing something wrong or the ball is harming them. You mentioned before the 2/3 full. I love the 2/3 full. That's where I want you to all start. Doesn't mean a full ball is unsafe. It just means that your body and the tissues are going to respond. And the 3 minutes is magic because we know that that's what it takes to start to get to that fascial tissue and to like melt over top of it. So there is a method to the madness of this.
Yeah. And I think, like I said, sometimes people, like you said, are adverse to pain or whatever, but just think of it, you guys, like a workout. When we're working out and holding a plank, like, yeah, my abdominals and my core and, a lot of other muscles too. I did a workout yesterday where, yeah, I was working shoulders and then I held a plank at the end and my shoulders were like burning in that plank, and so change always comes from a place of discomfort in so many areas of our lives. Right. And so, I just think it's a really great tool and something I've really been enjoying using, and worked my way up to the 3 minutes. But at first, like you said, it was like, I think I got up to like it was under 30 seconds, but between like 20 and 30 seconds. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. Hello. I just think of it like a workout. Think of it like, your muscles being tense or maybe a little bit sore or uncomfortable in a workout. And then of course, knowing the benefits of that later. One of the things that you mentioned, and I want to touch on before we close, because I think that's why I love having these conversations, because to be honest, like, I don't care. Like, I'll say poop and pelvic floor and, but there's a lot of women, like you said, out there, well, you'll have conversations all day about this, or this. But when it comes, like different muscles or going to spin class or whatever, but when it comes to like this area, it can be, just kind of uncomfortable for a lot of people to talk about, I don't know, maybe some people might buy this and not want to tell their friends or their partner or something. Like, it's just a conversation or a topic that sometimes feels funny. And so when you're working with women and you're seeing that relief, are you seeing them becoming more and more comfortable with, talking about this space or working in this space? Or how do you talk to women in a way that makes them feel comfortable about this? Because I know this, for some people, when they hear some of the conversations we have or just talk, or the words that just easily flow out of our mouths, or like you said, I was like on a foam roller and then I grabbed this ball and I was sitting here, and it's like, I think that not everybody is like that, but I really want, through this podcast and through the work and stuff that I do, to bring light to some stuff that people just like don't like talking about. So how do you get people to like talking about this? And why should we like talking about this?
So I often sometimes I ponder what happened in our lifetimes, or in the lifetimes of like our moms and our grandmas, where this was like, no one talked about it, right? Like it just wasn't talked about. And what I do with all of my clients is kind of like, the first time we chatted about it, the more matter of fact you make it, the more comfortable people will be. The other part of this is, I believe that we've been educated to believe that no one else has these problems but me, right? We see on TV commercials that, the solutions are the adult, I call them pull-ups, because that's what my boys used to wear when I was potty training them, right? Like the adult diapers. And, you see the new commercials with like the businesswoman in her beautiful suit and like the construction guy and the rocker that's on stage. And we're led to believe that if these cool people are wearing them, then you should too. And that's the solution. Or for men, right, with erectile dysfunction, like gazillion-dollar drug industries made out of telling men that your body doesn't work. So this is what you need for your body to work. And actually, in most cases, all those men need is some pelvic floor physiotherapy to release the pelvic floor, to allow blood flow back to their penis, and you're back in business, right? So and that's why I called it the Cooch Ball, you guys. Some people get really offended, and I've made some non-friends, let's say that are like, oh my God, that, that's so disrespectful that you would call it the Cooch Ball. And I wanted to make it a sassy, fun product, because I wanted people to say like, what, you called it the what? And, and then the Cooch Ball is the co-branded product for guys. And I feel like my mission is to, break the barriers of what people believe about their body. Like, we are amazing human beings, right? We want to impact the world in big ways, our families, our communities, our workplaces. And yet, if you're led to believe that because you want to be a mom, or I've worked with so many young women who like dancers, Highland dancers especially, right? Because think of like the river dance, like they are motionless from their belly button up, and their legs, right, are just working like, equestrian, people in the equestrian world, like things we choose that bring us joy in our life can also bring in dysfunction in our body without us even knowing it. So it's not like a DNA genetically disposed, you pulled the short straw, you're good for the rest of your life. That's not it at all. And even to go one step younger, like even kids in their preteens that are still wetting the bed, a lot of times that is a pelvic floor issue, right? So that's, that I feel like that's my calling, is just to find people like you who understand the importance of getting this message out. And the more of those cool people and influencers that are talking about it and experiencing it, then have the ability, like a pebble thrown into a calm lake, the impact just permeates out. And as soon as women and men, I believe, are slightly educated, because there's a gap in the education is powerful. And when you can understand why something is going on, that there's, I have to work my inner thighs and my glute med and my deep abdominals to support my pelvic floor. All right. So now when I'm doing those side leg lifts and my leg feels like it's going to fall off, I'm going to remember that this is part of my pelvic floor training, right? And so it's giving them this new roadmap, this new paradigm to be inspired, to get into their power and, make their lives amazing. And then, impact, like I said, impact from a place of confidence around their body.
Yes. So good. I love your mission. I'm so on board with everything that you're doing. And awareness is really that first step. So maybe you guys are listening and you just figured out what the heck your pelvic floor was. Maybe you were listening, and you just realized like, oh yeah, maybe that's why I'm experiencing a little bit of what Jana mentioned. And maybe just some awareness of possibility and opportunity to treat ourselves, to really say like, okay, I'm not opposed, to help when we need to have surgeries or just different things like that. But just to say like, hey, like there's a little bit of awareness here of what you can do to prevent things like that moving forward, and to help yourself and to invest in yourself when it comes to, the 3 minutes a day and that awareness in that space. And so thank you for helping us create that awareness today of like what our pelvic floor is, why it's important, and all the, for me, a lot of the awareness when talking to you is like, oh yeah, there's a lot of muscles kind of involved there. And we need to stimulate blood flow there. So that makes sense. A lot of the stuff talking about breathing, that for me was a huge awareness when it came to like the deadlift and the exercise movements, and not only like how we're breathing, but what's happening within that pelvic floor space. So I feel like this episode is full of what Oprah calls, I love when she calls them the aha moments, where you're just like, there's just so much awareness in this episode. And that's always the first step to making changes in our lives and our routines and our pelvic floor. So I could talk to you for hours. Like I could just be like, okay, well, what about this? And all of that. And I know that everyone listening probably feels the exact same. So let everyone know where they can connect with you and how they can learn more from you.
For sure. So both on Facebook and Instagram, you can follow either just at Cooch Ball or the Meta District, Meta with 2 T's. You can follow me there. And then just if you want to connect, you can direct message me through there, or just info@metadistrict.com. I'm happy to answer any emails. And, if I could just take 30 seconds, Lunden, one thing I forgot to mention, which I've been getting a lot of questions about lately, is women are asking about bowel incontinence and wondering how that, the pelvic floor impacts that. And so I'm just going to drop this little nugget and tell you this. Bowel incontinence, which basically means like we're pooping a little bit, right? Or you go to the bathroom, you wipe, you go on with your day. You go to the bathroom the next time and you're like, why do I have this little stamp on my panties, right? Like that's what I'm talking about. Okay. We're talking about stuff here. Bowel incontinence is very common. And I want you to know, because so many people, if we think like, urinary incontinence, people aren't talking about, they are definitely not talking about bowel incontinence. And I wanted those of you who are on this, listening to this podcast today, you are not all alone. I've worked with many clients who we've worked through this. The Cooch Ball has improved the situation a lot. And here's what I've actually learned about bowel incontinence is that you may want to check with a naturopath or a medical practitioner, a nutritionist, because what I'm learning is that a lot of bowel incontinence has a gut root cause, like SIBO, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth, or any kind of leaky gut, or Crohn's, right? So, even gluten intolerance, food sensitivity. So understand that oftentimes this pelvic floor, issue as bowel incontinence, it is very often a symptom of something else going on in your body. And so please, look into that, because it was one of those aha moments for me. And I was like, I had no idea that those two would have been related. So thank you for letting me just drop that extra little nugget into there.
No, thank you. I know someone listening needed to hear that. So that's why you said it. Yeah. I love it. So social media, we'll get all those links in the show notes too. So you can follow everything that is Cooch Ball. So it's at Cooch Ball on Instagram or at Meta District, as you mentioned. And then you also have a course, right? Or like a little freebie that we can learn more about this from you. Tell us about that.
So I created this course. I always get asked about my story, and, you alluded to like my physical pain in my bio. And so this course is called Turning Pain from Limitation to Inspiration. It's a 4-part mini masterclass that I am gifting all of you today, if you would like to access it. The link will be in the show notes. And basically, it's, like I said, it's my story. And after each 15-minute video, there's one very simple takeaway that you can implement into your life like that day to make a difference. So, and then you'll get the second video 3 days later, and then 3 days later. So it's a 12-day experience with me. I would love for you to check it out and see, maybe you can learn something new. We touch on breathing again, and we talk on the importance of hydration. We talk about spinal movements in there. So that's what that course is all about.
I love it. And thank you. And I can't wait to take it, because I haven't yet, but I know that you will be a continuous source of wisdom for me when it comes to this and probably a lot of other things. So thank you so much for being on here, Jana. I know that your time is super valuable, and the fact that you're spending it here with us is so fantastic. And we're learning so much from you. All of you guys listening, if you have any questions, let us know. You can connect with both myself and Jana on social media, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of women listening that are going to have, like you said, I have to talk about this because people are coming, to bowel incontinence. I think that there's going to be a lot more awareness and comfortability for women to kind of ask some of these questions, or, feel like they're, reach like, hey, what about this, and eventually get to the point where you can just talk about it like we are today, which is the goal. Thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thanks, Lunden.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Self-Love and Sweat, the podcast. Hey, do me a favor. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, give us a review. This really helps a lot. And share this with a friend. I'm only one person, and with your help, we can really spread the message of self-love and sweat and change more lives all around the world. I'm Lunden Souza, reminding you that you deserve a life full of passion, presence, and purpose, fueled by self-love and sweat. This podcast is a Hit Spot Austria production.